We finally found it, our redemption. For several months, the Voathe sailed the seas, searching for a land to spoil, a land to conquer, a land to harvest, and a people to enslave and consume. Serendipitously, they'd discovered a lush and prodigious island in the Sea of Septeum. It had a prolific mount seemingly at the center of it, and verdant and tropical forests from end to end. It was a veritable paradise of plenty for the starving sailors from the east, hungry to reap the spoils of their risky adventure. "May Zenovex provide us with bounty upon these shores," cried out one of the sailors, hoping to reach the beach so that he could pluck the first fruit. "Soon, my men, soon we will feast upon this land's seed." A colossal man stepped out from the horde upon the ship. He had long, black hair, a thick and bushy beard, copper skin, and fiery yellow eyes. His name was Wavoth. He was the war chief of the Voathe, and, amongst his warriors, was renowned for his decisive and effective command. Upon his neck hung a string of teeth. Not just any teeth, human teeth. The teeth of those he'd personally killed and whom he wished to remember. "Sir, what are we to do when we get there?" said one of the sailors, rowing towards the shore. You are not Voathe. You are a rower. Do you not remember how you were given your task, thrall? We ripped you from the arms of your family. We placed you in that seat, and for our long journey, you have sat there, helping us reach our destination. Now you will meet our Lord." Wavoth took a serrated black blade from his sheath, lifted it into the air, and struck the rower on the back of the neck, slicing through and beheading the man. "Your blood will appease Zenovex, rower. The rest of you swine, your deed is complete. Men of Voathe, send them to the deep." The Voathe started roaring with laughter as they slaughtered and tossed their slaves' bodies off the deck. The other Voathan sailors could be heard chortling from their vessels as the men on Wavoth's ship liberated themselves of the burden of their subjugated passengers. 5 long wooden boats landed upon the white, sandy shores of the isle. Each had around 200 men aboard, all of whom were vicious, battle-hardened warriors, ready to reap from the island all its riches. The slaves aboard the other craft were brought to shore and beheaded in the name of Zenovex, the god of the Voathe. The soldiers laughed as they watched the waters of the isle turn vermilion from the blood, leaving the bodies to rot upon the beach. Dozens of soldiers charged into the lush tropical jungle. They ran in, searching for food, hungry to see what fruits they could gather. After an hour, they returned to the beach, half their lot. "What happened to you, men?" Wavoth asked, disconcertingly. "That jungle's a poisonous flower. Our men began eating the first fruit they saw. There were bushels of it, but as soon as they took a bite, they keeled over, writhing in pain and agony, dying moments later. There were serpents too, vipers that plunged their fangs into our party, killing their wretched victims in seconds. It is hellish out there." "So you have come back with nothing?" "I fear that I have disappointed you, my lord." Wavoth raised his blade into the air and rent the man in two. "How dare you lot disappoint me? How dare you think you're not worthy sacrifices to Zenovex? He demands your being. He demands your blood. And in fear of him, you came back to me, empty-handed." The other party members looked on Wavoth in fear. "The rest of you, butcher the bodies of the slaves still on the beach. Tonight, we will feast on their flesh." "My lord, that is not all we found," chimed up one of the Voathan scouts. "Are you to anger me further, man?" "No, my lord. Perhaps you will find this news fortuitous. We found a stone monument in one of the locations we searched." "And how do you know this is worthwhile?" inquired Wavoth. There were etchings on it, and signs that someone had recently been in the area. There were offerings, twine offerings, crafts, and candles that appeared to have been recently lit. "So we're not alone here." "It doesn't seem that way, my lord." "Then, perhaps, your endeavor wasn't useless after all. Now, at least, we have a mark. Prepare the meats, my men, for tonight we dine on the shores of our new home, eager to seek out the riches of this sweet paradise." A man was meditating in the darkness of a building lit only by torches and oil lamps made of clay. He sat before a great spherical structure made completely of stone. He appeared to be prostrating himself before the monument, focusing on the palms of his hands. A man walked into the temple, and light bled into the void. "Arun, how goes your prayers?" said the man entering the building. "Not well, Uresh. As I watched the waves yesterday, and the movements of the clouds over the great Mount Imute, they were discordant. They weren't harmonized. The energies of the beautiful Vane do not concord with the perfect will of Teum. This does not bode well for us." "What are we to do, Arun?" asked the man. "We are to make a sacrifice." "Who's to do so?" "I will send for Samtathun and Mane," said Harun with slight concern. "And they are to be the offerings bearers?" "Indeed." "Anything else, High Priest?" "Yes. How goes the harvest?" "It does not look good, Harun." The man looked down at the ground. "Look up. Do not be ashamed. Do we, at least, have enough to last Kian and Nok?" "We do, but we do not have more than that. After Nok, in the coming months, we will rely on Heothen and what she can offer. The Isle's gifts will not suffice. We will need to reclaim other parts of her, irrigate and plow her fields, toil the soil, and aim to reap again in Basram. Either way, this is not a beneficent sign." "There is something else, Harun," uttered the man wearily. "More?" "I'm afraid so. There have been reports of unknown movement on the southern part of Heothen." "Unknown movement? What do you mean?" "We're not sure. Some have said that there were demons walking through the jungles, screaming and screeching as they tried to take from the Isle what was not theirs." "Demons? This is not good. I fear we have angered Teum, or worse, his son, Savel." "Perhaps we have, Arun." "Bring me Samtathun and Mane. I must prepare them for their journey," exclaimed the priest, bestowing upon the servant his holy duty. It was early morning on Heothen, and a group of around 20 Voathe were encroaching upon a small village. The sky had a rosy hue, the air was thick and humid, and the jungle's shade did little to diminish the horrible heat. The Voathe were drenched in their own sweat, hungry and eager for a fight. They realized that the villagers were still asleep, or, at least, missing. The Voathan soldiers looked towards the leader of the group. "What are we doing, sir?" said one of the men. "Stay quiet. There's food storage ahead. I can see it." The leader looked upon 3 clay containers that had thatch coverings on them. The soldiers surrounded the stores, pulled out fabric bags they had on them, and filled them with the grain inside the pots. Some of their bags had holes in them, causing the grain to spill on the ground. Regardless, the Voathe were elated as they reaped the grain the village had reserved, as they stole from the dutiful farmers, merely to stave off their self-made starvation. Then, a man spotted the Voathe and shouted at them, ending their silent and thievish escapade. The leader looked at the man. "Quickly, one of you, silence him." One of the Voathe charged at the man, took out a short black blade from his belt, and stabbed him in the chest. The man silently fell to the ground, but it was already too late. As the soldier felled the man, an arrow came from his right, striking the Voathan in the neck, so that he, too, was cut down. "Men, ready yourselves." The leader prepared the raiders. They tied the fabric sacks they'd filled with the village's grain to their belts and prepared their weapons. Daggers, long blades, javelins, spears, and bows. A party of warriors from the village descended on the Voathe, shooting arrows and slinging stones, roaring as they let their retribution loose. The Voathe, realizing they were outnumbered, ran into the fields behind them, hoping to escape from the righteous warriors. As they ran into the field, they passed by a burning fire. One of the Voathe plunged his spear into the pit, avoiding the arrows and stones being pelted at him, lit it, and continued to the edge of the field. Before he ran into the pasture, he lit the crop with the inflamed pole. One of the soldiers from the village spotted the Voathan, though, arched his bow, and let loose an arrow that struck the man in his chest. The group of raiders left him to die by the warrior's hands. After several minutes of running, cutting through the crops, and breaching into the jungle, the Voathe stopped and caught their breath. "Ansile, we have what we came for." The leader, a bald, tall man with a short black beard, looked at the Voathan raiders. His breathing was steady. It was as though he hadn't exerted himself in the slightest. "My father will not be pleased." "What were we to do?" chimed up one of the raiders, trying to breathe. "You should have kept your eyes open." "Sir, we have some grain, at least," cut in another raider. "Will that not please him?" "Please him? You expect that beast to be pleased? His blade will taste the blood of at least one of you for your wrongdoing. No. We will go back to that village. We will return. We will cut those warriors down. We will take their children and women, and then we will offer them as a sacrifice to my father for your transgressions. Let us move out." The raiding party began marching towards their encampment on the beach. There, their judgment and punishment would be doled out. There they would face Wavoth's terror, and treat him for mercy, offering their souls up to the capricious and vile Xenovex. Two individuals were hiking up Immute's path. One was a man. He had long, fair hair wrapped in a bun. He was wearing a fabric shirt, cloth pants, and leather moccasins, bound and wrapped by straps. He had a large pack that was hanging over his shoulder, its strap across his chest, its contents pristine wood, peeking out. The other was a woman. She had black hair that was, like the man's, in a bun. She had similar clothing on too, but was carrying a package wrapped in a satchel made from the skins of a local beast. "My love, is the sacrifice secured?" said the man as he continued to trek up the mountain trail. "It is, Sam," Good. It needs to be kept safe for the good of our people. We Imbulim have practiced this ritual for centuries, you know. The man stopped and looked at his wife. We've faced hardships like the one we're facing now in the past, and we survived. We won't be cut down by this poor harvest. He smiled at her, touched her face, turned back around, and continued to ascend up the mountain. Isn't it strange how cool it gets up here? That's always been my favorite part, Sam. The cool mist covering my body, the ocean breeze, amplified, the whole horizon set before me. This mountain is my favorite place on Heothen. It always has been, since I was a child. Perhaps that's why I love you. You contain, in your being, the wisdom and beauty of Imute. Do I? This mountain calls to you, Mane, and you answer. But you don't answer because you want to be the mountain. You answer because you are the mountain. This place is naturally you. If it does you wrong, you've done it wrong. And if it treats you right, you've treated it right. My father says that some of us speak and act for different parts of the island. And in that one regard, I happen to agree with him. And what part of Heothen do you speak for, Sam? The wretched and bitter jungle? Samtathan looked back at her briefly and smiled. No, I'm not cruel enough. I think it's the waves, the sea that surrounds our land. It calls to me. I feel it. I know it. I love it. So you're saying you love yourself? Should one not love oneself? I wish Septaeum well, and I treat her well, and she does the same for me. Well, at least she loves you too. He looked back at her again. Hey, you love yourself too. The mountain is you, and you're him. So you think I'm a man? You'll have trouble explaining that to our children one day. She chuckled at Samtathan. He glanced back at her and grinned. Let's keep going, my love. After several hours of hiking, Samtathan and Mane were nearly at the sacrificial altar of Imute. The two were ecstatic. They'd nearly achieved their goal. Suddenly, Mane tumbled and fell, and from her back, the satchel slipped. It opened and the pristine ritual sacrifice fell out. It became sullied with dirt and detritus from the surrounding trees and shrubs that spotted the mountain. Samtathan's face was agape. A look of shock and despair washed over him as he clasped his face with his hands. No! Samtathan rushed after the sacrifice. A piece of meat that had been preserved since the heat of Yohim bear down upon the Imbulim as they worked their fields, preparing for Karsolv when they would reap their crop. He picked up the piece of preserved meat, held it in his hands, and tried to clean it with his sweaty clothing. What are we to do now? What are we to do, Mane? He asked, angrily. I'm sorry. You what? He walked up to her, handing her the sacrificial meat. Put this back in the pack. We have a little further to go. I don't want to hear it. Let's go. They went up a tortuous pass, and then, after the final bend, they spotted the ritual altar. Samtathan stretched out his left hand, and Mane, without a word, gave him the sacrifice. He took out the pristine wood from his pack and placed both the offering and wood on the black stone altar. Both kneeled on the ground, prostrating themselves before the sacrifice. Our highest lord, Teum, we offer you, O mind of the world's creation and form, this sacrifice that you've bestowed on us. May its power satiate Yanawe, your daughter and your hand's beautiful wife, so that her dark spirit may be made light. May she bless her husband, Savel, with love, so that we may be graced with levity. O highest lord, Teum, mind of minds, of you were begot. and to you return." Samtathan finished the prayer and started a fire at the altar, watching as the offering was engulfed in flame. He meditated on his words for a moment, closed his eyes, and sat, listening to the snapping of the burning wood and the sizzling of the meat. He opened his eyes, and to the southernmost part of the island, he saw smoke rising. "Mane, look, there's fire to the south." "What?" She opened her eyes, looked out over the cliff, and saw the smoke as well. "No, this can't be. We have to go, now." "What of the ritual?" "It's complete. We must go, now." "Will it be enough?" "We will see." Two men, clad in studded leather armor, were walking through an ashen and charred village. The thatch roofs, straw and clay walls of the buildings, they'd been burnt and had crumbled to the flames of an assault. Sticky blood spotted the ground, but neither of the two men could see any bodies. Arrows were strewn about, stone spears were left where they'd fallen, and leather chest pieces were still hanging on their racks. "Tramtathan, my lord, what are we to do? No Imbulam would have done this to another." "We know. We're facing an unknown force. We need to learn about them. I have scouts scouring the island to discover whom we're facing." Tramtathan looked around him at the destruction, the smoldering heap of a village that was once thriving with life, joy, and love. "That will not be enough, Exom. We need to consult Haroon." "And what is he to say? What wisdom will he have for us regarding such a situation? Perhaps a prayer or offering would suffice?" "No, nothing of his will help us here." "You still fail to understand the power of faith, my friend." "I do not. But I do fail to see the point of meaningless rules and rituals that inspire little in my men in their time of need." "And you think that's all Haroon will offer us?" "No. He will have legends that will inspire the men, if he's willing to afford them such succor. Otherwise, he will walk them through a pointless ceremony that grants them not more than a false hope." "Look, there, the shrine." Tramtathan stopped walking through the ruined village, pointed towards the temple, and saw that blood surrounded it. The two men ran into the building, and to their horror, found the village's children. The altar to Team had been defiled with the blood of the Imbulam youth. Their throats had been slit, and their scarlet blood had been wiped upon the stone sphere. Some of the children's eyes were wide open, the look of terror still upon their face. Tramtathan collapsed to the ground. He began to weep. Not only had his lord been besmirched by this horrific and vile act, but the young lives of this little village had been snuffed out by cruel and vicious beasts. Exom put his hand upon Tramtathan's back, seeking to console a man burdened with an unconsolable act. I am sorry, my lord." Tramtathan rolled his shoulder, throwing Exom's hand off of him, stood up, and glanced at the man beside him. "We need to go. We have work to do." Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't make a sound. He didn't moan or bellow. He simply wept. He cried tears of silence. He stepped out into the open air and breathed in deeply. He beheld the skies above him. The sun was setting and the heavens had become a sickly yellow. He looked to his right. He realized that the stores of grain had been sacked. The food that had been stored in them, rent from the Imbulam's hands. "They've stolen from us, Exom. They've stolen our food. They've stolen our people. They've stolen our sanctity. They've stolen our children." We must find these monsters. We will, my lord. We will. Tramtathan looked at Exum. Never call me that again. I am not worthy of that title. I am no one's lord. I am a fool cloaked in the guise of a leader, destined to drive his people to their end. Exum was silent. No response could suffice. He simply bowed his head, walked away, left Tramtathan to his grief, and began mentally preparing for the task before him. The Voathe had set up their encampment upon the beach. Massive muslin tents were erected to house their soldiers. Dirty mats covered the ground, and trees hewn in two served as tables for the ravenous warriors. A line of Embulam villagers, adult men and women, were arrayed before Wavoth, stripped of their clothing, shivering, despite the roaring fires at the center of the grand tent. Look at this lot, my lord. How pathetic they are. It makes me sick, chortled one of the Voathan. This is whom we're to fight. This is the enemy? Said one of the others, mockingly. Even Xenovex would consider these bodies unworthy, cruelly barked another as he put a dagger to the face of one of the Embulam. Enough, men, roared Wavoth. Slaves, do you see that food there? He gestured to what was laid out upon the shields of the Voathe. Serve my men. The Embulam were reticent at first, but after being coerced by Voathan spears, they quickly began picking up the shields and serving the warriors. The soldiers ripped the food from their hands, violently fondled the women, jeering at the men, throwing water and alcohol on them. Some, in their madness, smeared food on the bodies of the Embulam women, holding them to the ground, then proceeding to eat off them. The Embulam men grimaced while they watched as their women were defiled. Some of them rushed in, seeking to help, but they were restrained, knocked out, and thrown into the corner of the tent to be dealt with later. Wavoth grinned. He looked at one of the female slaves and waved her over. Woman, pour me my drink. The Embulam woman looked at him. His teeth were yellow and he smelt of bitter dung. She picked up the leather flask and began to pour its contents into a wooden goblet, but in a fit of rage, doused Wavoth with the fluid in the container. Ansile charged over to his father. He grabbed the woman, threw her to the ground, and mounted her. He took out his dagger, thrusted it into her chest, cutting it open and tearing out her heart. Still beating, he enveloped it with his lips, took a bite, and chewed on a morsel of the muscle till he could down the piece of her flesh. He gazed upon her. She was still alive, her eyes quickly blinking, and then the vitality in her irises vanished. She was dead. He looked up at his fellow Voathan and gutturally bellowed, "Have at them, boys." The warriors grabbed the Embulam slaves and began tearing them limb from limb with their bare hands. The Embulam screeched in agony and terror as they were butchered, alive, their flesh eaten in front of them, their blood poured into the wooden goblets to be guzzled down by the ravenous and vile Voathan horde. "Ansile," shouted father to son, "you had no authority to do that." "Father, what's wrong?" "The men are relieving themselves, letting off some steam." "I needed one of them." "For what, father? These people are weak. They will fall easily to our warriors." "Do you think you're so wise? I needed one of them for information." "Information? Did I mumble?" Yes, information. I needed details on the whereabouts of their other villages. You have what you need, Father. I do? Well, certainly not from you. Wavoth glared at his son. Seisanth, come here. An oily man slithered from the corner of the tent. He was thin and lanky, covered in thick ash and dung that had hardened on his body so that his skin appeared gray. He prostrated himself before Wavoth. How may I please you, my lord? I have a mission for you, my dear snake. Seisanth looked up to Wavoth, his eyes glimmering, baring his blackened teeth with a sickening smile. Tell me more, my lord. At the center of Eothen, beneath Mount Immute, was the Imbulum capital, Raylium. Stone buildings spiraled around the heart of the city, the holy temple to Teum. Fabrics of varying colors billowed in the isle's breeze, even at its heart, but the affect of the people had become gray, somber, and sullen. The people hadn't eaten, or they'd fasted and consumed very little. The minimal amount of food that the Imbulum had accrued had gone to their soldiers, whom, considering all the work they'd been doing, preparing for their fight with the Bawathe, wasn't enough to sustain them. The soldiers were arrayed in a square formation in Raylium's market. There were 4 cohorts of 300 men. Each cohort had 180 men armed with spears and shields, 60 axemen, their bronze blades glimmering in the light of the day, 20 javelins, and 40 archers. The spear and axemen were equipped with leather harnesses, bracers, greaves, and sandals with straps binding them to their shins and ankles. The javelin men and archers were suited to be light. They were adorned with the skins of varying animals, leopards, wolves, foxes, and bears, with sandals of the same sort that the others were wearing. Though they were well armed, they were exhausted, their morale lacking. Exom looked upon his troops. He would be leading them in battle against the Bawathe. To distinguish him from the other soldiers in the heat of battle, he wore a flag upon his back via a pole attached to his bronze cuirass. Upon the flag was an image of a square enveloping a sphere that contained within it an equilateral triangle. He looked upon the men, arrayed and fully adorned in their gear. Men, I know you will serve Imbulum with honor against the horde we face. They are a wretched bunch. They've taken your family, they've stolen your food, they've butchered your children while defiling a temple to the Creator. They've besmirched you. They want you under their heel. They want your flesh. They want to consume you. They are nothing more than vile beasts intent on warping your body till all that you once were is gone and not more of your people remains. We will not let them achieve that. We will not let them besmirch our civilization or our law. We will succeed in that. I promise you. Behind Exom, Samtithan and Tramtithan could be heard shouting at each other. Do you seriously think such rituals will be enough to rally our men, Father? Roared Samtithan. If the priest wills it. If the priest wills it? Are we merely to rely on the authority of an old man who hasn't seen nor heard the horrors of these wretches before us? He is wise. He is experienced. He knows more of the inner workings of the Creator's world than we have time in our lives to learn. That does not mean that we lack the capacity for reason, that we lack the capacity to see with our own eyes, that we lack our own worldly experience to work from. All of that is irrelevant. These are matters of faith. Matters of knowledge that is reserved for those who've given up their lives to ascertain its workings. Authority alone does not make him right. No, it does not. I will give you that. but he has his reasons, and, in light of what I know of our faith, I agree with him. These men need rest, meditation, food, and water. They do not need to test themselves and their stamina beneath the night sky by foregoing sleep, said Samtefin, vexedly. He has his reasons. And what are those, Father? They are myriad and complex. This is inane. They need their rest. Do you not understand that this is the will of our Lord, Team, son? Samtefin went quiet. He revered his lord, but he wasn't willing to heed his priest's order. I will speak to Haroun. He and I will come to terms. This is a travesty. No leader would do this to his men. You still think I'm a leader? Tramdathan left his son and approached Exom. I figure you've heard. I did hear, a little, replied Exom. Does he speak the truth, your son? My men are to keep themselves from sleep the entire night? They are to stand ready beneath the stars? That is correct. They will be exhausted, my lord. Tramdathan looked down, his eyes momentarily fluttering, and then refitting his gaze upon Exom. This is the will of our Lord, Exom. This is the will of the Creator. They are already starving. Exom became quiet. Their morale is severely diminished. How am I expected to believe they will survive this? He inquired in a disappointed tone. Perhaps they won't, Exom, but our people will. Within the Temple of Team, the clay oil lamps and torches illuminated the room in a dark orange hue. Haroun was meditating before the great stone sphere as incense burned before him, permeating the air with a bitter aroma. He was chanting an indiscernible hymn beneath his breath. Then, he vigorously stood up, clapped his hands, let out a long roar, and listened as his voice echoed through the temple. When the sound ceased, he bowed his head before the spherical stone altar and began to weep. He wiped his tears with his hands and then rubbed the stone with them, chanting another hymn. Suddenly, Samtefin and Mane barged into the holy room, interrupting Haroun in the midst of his act. He looked at them. The sun's light washed upon his face, a pale face that was scarred, with dark bags beneath his eyes. He bared his teeth. They were yellow. He was not happy with what Samtefin and Mane had just done. Samtefin broached the silence. Haroun, what have you done to my father? Haroun shortly chortled. It is not I. I have shown your father his path. He is taking it. He is in command of himself, not I. You are warping his mind, old man, barked Samtefin. Woman, will you tell your husband that he's speaking out of turn? Perhaps he will acknowledge his insolence if it's made evident by you, not I. Haroun, he is concerned. He loves his father. That is all. But that is not all you have come to tell me, is it? Said the priest. Samtefin cut in. What do you mean? You had a task for me, responded Haroun. The two of them looked down, ashamed. Mane spoke first. I dropped the sacrifice. This does not bode well for us. He covered his eyes. I fear the worst. I still burnt the offering. I cleaned it off. You cleaned it off, man? Haroon lifted his head, his eyes shooting daggers at Samtathan. With what? Your shirt? Your spit? Your dung? You've no idea the wretched and corrupt beast you are, Samtathan. I did my best. Indeed, you did. We will see if it was good enough. Haroon looked upon the altar. I have received a dream. Savel has spoken to me. The troops are not to fight. What, Haroon? Roared Samtathan. I made myself clear. They are to lay down their arms before the invading force. They will die, Samtathan said, astounded. That is what you think, man, not I. It is not a matter of thought. That is correct, affirmed the priest. Then you know the truth, Haroon. I know what I saw. I know what will happen to them. Death is not their end, the priest prophesied. Mane chimed in. Certainly, Haroon. You cannot simply think that they should give themselves to the monsters we are facing. I did not say that. Haroon, do not play coy. You said that they are to lay down their arms, that they're not to fight. How could you suggest such a thing? It is a message from the hand of Team. You cannot be serious. This is madness, Haroon, said Mane, gritting her teeth. Do not speak out of turn, woman. Do not chide me, priest. Mane, enough. He is not worth our time. Come, let us leave him. We have to prepare. Haroon turned around and looked upon them. Prepare? Do you think it will be enough? It is better than nothing, priest, barked Samtathan. We will see, children. We will see. Evening had passed into night. A torrent of rain fell upon Heothan. The stars were nowhere to be seen, while Sesant, the eyes and ears of the Vawathe and Waveoth, skulked around Hralium, malevolent machinations running through his mind. The Imbulam city was silent, its people seemingly resting as he slithered through its streets and alleys, searching for a voice of value in the night. He spotted several guards resting at their post, slumped over, awake, but in no way coherent. Then he beheld, in the darkness of the streets, a house unlike any other, a house illuminated by torches, alive and teeming with movement. He knew this house, being unlike the rest, had to be of some worth to him, the Vawathe and Waveoth. As the rain pelted him and the stone around him, its echoes obfuscated his ability to hear the murmurs coming from the inside of the building. Still, he pressed himself against the wall, near an open aperture, and listened to the conversation going on inside, hoping to glean a modicum of information. He heard the voice of an aggressive man, his words echoing doubt. You must refrain from sleep tomorrow. I will hear no more of it. But, Exom, what part of that last sentence did you not understand, man? I said no more. Or do you wish to defy the wisdom of Teum? We do not. You don't? Yet you continue to question me, even after you knew the importance of his command. Sir, you cannot... Again, you insolent fool. My opinion on the matter bears no relevance to the supreme knowledge of a god. You understand me? We do, said the other man begrudgingly. Then you will keep your men awake. You will not let them fall prey to sleep. Once more, the man affirmed his command. I understand, sir. Good. Then leave my sight. Cécant didn't dare to peek into the window, lest he give himself away. But if what he heard was true, he was certain that the Voathe would have a field day with the Imbulum. They would be easy prey for the vicious and bloodthirsty warriors. Then, he heard another. I am proud of you, Exum. I no longer need your favor, Tramtathan. If I am on a mission from God, it is He who I aim to please. And if that pleases you, well, so be it. I see. Then your heart is in the right place. I do not know where my heart is anymore, said Exum, swallowing his words. I'm sorry, my dear friend. These are my men. These aren't toys for you, for that priest. And I respect my lord. But this is a test of faith that I fear I lack the heart to achieve. And yet you will, my friend. And yet I will. If you say so. A great flash of lightning struck the ground to Cécant's right, and a roar of thunder reverberated in his ears. If you say so, said Exum again. The downpour became louder, and Cécant could no longer hear what was being said inside the building. What he was able to gather, though, was that if he were to ascertain any more information, he would need to find the city's temple. He began prowling through the streets again, ducking and hiding behind all that he could to avoid being discovered by the guards on patrol. The rain continued to fall upon his head. Then, with one wrong step, he slipped and fell. His left foot knocked down a pot, sending it tumbling from its resting place, causing it to crack open upon the stone alleyway. A watchman turned around the corner and spotted Cécant. He got up, ran in the opposite direction of the guard, and avoided as many patrollers as he could during his flight. He remembered how he came into the city and, for what little wisdom he had, he knew that his best bet out of Raelium was the way he entered. He made it past the city limits. He thought he was out of the water. Then, he stumbled into an Imbulum villager. Both were knocked to the ground. He jumped up before the man, pulled his dagger from his belt, and cut the villager's throat before he made a noise, covering his tracks. He looked at the man, cocked his head, and furrowed his brow. What was your purpose, old man? Perhaps it was to be a sacrifice to pay for my sins. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps any desire or sense of meaning you had was merely an illusion of your upbringing. Maybe we, are not more than gears turning round and round till we're back precisely where we started, ending where we began. Or, perchance, you're a symbol of your people's fate and our redemption. For with every death a life's begot. Perhaps we are nothing. But then, who would be there to see so that all may be? Who's there who watches what the eyes of my people cannot see, what I cannot see? Who's there who hears what the ears of my people cannot hear, what I cannot hear? For without me, my people are blind and deaf. Yet with me, they are led by one that sees only shadows and hears naught but whispers. But I have my purpose, and I suppose that you did as well. Then it must be that we cannot be nothing, nor can we lack purpose. Nor was your death, then, worthless. Sleep, old man. Sleep and know that the night always becomes the morn. Then you will wake once more. "3 days and 2 nights later, the Voathe surrounded Raelium. spread out, slowly encroaching upon the city, skulking through the jungles that enveloped it as a lion would creep on her prey. They were armed with bows, spears, and javelins, and were eager to slaughter the Imbulum, securing their place on Heothen. A crescent moon hung in the sky and stars littered the heavens, yet the Voathe were utterly indifferent towards their beauty, detached from the splendor of the great blue yonder, their hearts turned away from the magnum opus of creation. The Voathe were carrying torches. Their plan was to burn out the Imbulum from their houses and temples, drive them into the streets as they screamed in terror and agony, only to slaughter them as they unwillingly entreated chaos with the fear of their demise, ironically walking into its hands. The Voathe hungered for the blood of their enemy, craved to see their foes fall before them in horror, aghast as their warriors descended upon their mark's body. They began to set alight the city, little by little, watching and waiting as their flames spread and the Imbulum began to wake, hollering as they became aware of the fires that were consuming their abodes. The Voathe, as the Imbulum fled from their homes, impotent to the blazes that were devouring all they'd built, sundered them once they left their residences and entered the streets, striking them in their blindness. Raelium became deluged with its people's blood, drowned out in the screams of their suffering, engulfed in the vile inferno the Voathe created. Exom, Tramdathan, and the Imbulum warriors, all 1,200 of them, surrounded the stone temple of Teum, unarmed, in a daze, staring at the stars in the heavens, praying to the Lord. Harun looked out upon them from the chambers of the Holy Sanctum, charging them with his divine command, demanding they give up their lives to appease Yahweh and her husband Savel, all so that Teum may save the Imbulum from their demise. The Voathe looked upon them and wickedly grinned as they saw the meal of violence they were to gorge themselves upon. They plunged upon the warriors, spilt their blood where they stood, yet as warriors of Teum, with knowledge that their people would be saved, they silently took their enemies' fatal blows, entreating death and the great slumber as true heroes. One by one, the Imbulum warriors were felled, and as each went down, contrary to all expectations they had, the Voathe felt no pleasure. They gained naught from their deed. They were only enraged more as their foe willingly entreated their own end. Harun, after all the other warriors, Exom and Tramdathan were cut down by the Voathe, stepped out from the temple's chamber, grabbed the nearest Voathan soldier he could, and gladly embraced the sweet kiss of death. Ansile, leading the charge against the city of Raelium, was incensed as he watched the Imbulum warriors give up their lives without a fight. His god, Xenovex, would be displeased with the offering his soldiers gave him, perhaps angered beyond reason, willing to take his vengeance out upon his own people. Ansile roared about the city's streets, searching for a sacrifice that would, perhaps, appease, if not his god's hunger, his own. Then he fell upon Samtathan and his wife, Mane. Samtathan wasn't willing to give in. He wasn't willing to hand over his life, even for the Lord of Creation. He took out his blade and engaged in martial combat with the commander of the Voathan army. A flurry of ferocious blows were exchanged, Samtathan dodging all of them, and Sile catching only a few himself, his wounds streaming out vermilion ichor. He pirouetted out of the fight for a brief moment, raised his weapon into the air above his head, and charged towards Samtathan, fully engrossed in his hunger for vengeance, enraptured by his anger. Yet in his hubris, he opened himself up to his own death's blow. Samtathan caught his mark. Ansile's chest and abdomen were open to a strike, and as wise as Samtathan was, he played his hand, driving his blade into the heart of his enemy. By the haughtiness of his own rage, Ansile's life was rent from him, his soul sent to his capricious and unforgiving god, forever to be a thrall to his will. Samthethan grabbed his wife and fled the city. Neither of them looked back, leaping over the bodies of Raelium's people, strewn about the ground, their blood soaking into the stone pavement of the city's streets and alleys. They caught glimpses of their monuments crumbling, their temple burning, their children being led away in chains by Vawathan warriors. In toto, the fall of their beloved civilization. When Samthethan cut down Ensile, Waevoth was watching. He helplessly beheld the prideful demise of his own son. There, his heart became icy, harder than stone. Any semblance of love the monster of a man had fled from his being, just as his son's vitality streamed forth from his form. He charged after Mane and Samthethan, engulfed in a black flame, analogous to the fires consuming Raelium, hell-bent on striking the two down in vengeance. He mercilessly sundered anyone who entered his path. He didn't separate his own from the Imbulum. All were an obstacle to his desire. All were nothing more than flesh destined to fall to fulfill his selfish aims. The flames enveloping Raelium and its people leapt from the city and into the jungle, spreading outward from the center of Eothen, drowning the entire isle in a ravenous inferno. The Vawathan soldiers were dumbfounded. The glorious paradise they'd found, the island that they massacred the Imbulum for, was being wiped away by their foolishness, purified in the fires of their own doing. They cried out as they tried to flee from Raelium, but there was no exit. It was too late for the lot of them. They were all burnt alive in the city they'd sought to conquer. By fate's hand, though, Samthethan and Mane escaped just before the flames had sprung forth from the city's homes, businesses, and temple, into Heothen's jungle. Unfortunately, Waevoth was just as lucky. He, too, escaped the fire and continued to hunt down the two lovers. As Mane and Samthethan reached the beach, Mane twisted her ankle and fell on the isle's sandy shore. Samthethan rushed over to her and picked her up, carrying her to a pier on the shoreline where a boat was tied up with food and water. It was a deep-sea fishing ship that the Imbulum sailors commanded when their farmers' harvests weren't enough to hold the isle's people over. With how poor the harvest was this year, the Imbulum sailors were preparing an expedition to bring back enough fish to hold the men and women of Eothen over until they could reap their crop again. As Samthethan placed Mane on the ship, Waevoth came forth from the jungle, his eyes fiery, blade in hand, charging toward Samthethan. Samthethan realized that he had no choice. He had to face Waevoth, securing his wife and his escape from the hellscape that was once their home. He grabbed the spear that was laying on the dock, picked it up and ran towards Waevoth. Waevoth charged at Samthethan as well. The two met to engage in combat, Waevoth nearly missing him with his blade. Waevoth wildly slashed at Samthethan, failing on account of his blind rage. He was moving, almost, too fast for Samthethan to read his position. But Samthethan continued to watch the core of Waevoth's body, focusing on his central mass. Without restraint, and advancing faster than lightning, Waevoth managed to graze and wound Samthethan's leg. Pleased with his strike, Waevoth sneered as Samthethan let out a cry and began to limp. "You will suffer by my hand, fool." Samthethan looked at Waevoth. He grimaced in pain. "Are you not pleased with what you've done, beast?" "With what I've done?" Waevoth questioned, infuriated that he even be interrogated as such. You killed my son, worm. He was mad, insane. He left me no choice. Choice? Wavoth chortled at Samdathan's assumption. You think you have a choice? You are a slave to Xenovex, lord of darkness and suffering, begetter of power and father of wrath. By his will, you will be slayed alive, rat. Your god is a farce. Is he? Look around you, wretch. Look as your land burns, your people die, and your gods abandon you. You think he does. I think? He bellowed with laughter. I know. My lord has shown me my fate. Your god is one of darkness. He cares only for himself. He has deceived you. You will not leave this land. Samdathan charged at Wavoth with his spear, thrusted at him, missing. Wavoth pivoted, dodged Samdathan's weapon, but, caught off guard, lost his footing in the sand. Samdathan saw his opening, charged at Wavoth, hoping to drive his spear into his gut. Wavoth rolled to his left, nearly catching Samdathan's spear in his abdomen, riposting against his nemesis. But Samdathan was too quick for Wavoth, even with his wounded leg. Readying his weapon, as Wavoth rushed towards him, using his weight against him, Samdathan skewered him, driving his spear right through Wavoth's gut. The necklace around Wavoth's neck fell off as he slouched to the ground. Samdathan picked up Wavoth's blade and raised it into the air as he watched the life leave him. Any last words, monster? Wavoth smiled, blood bubbling up from his mouth. Die. Samdathan struck Wavoth on the neck, beheading him, leaving his lifeless body on the beach. Samdathan ran to the ship, ignoring his wounded leg, hoping that Mane was safe. My love. You did it, Sam. Nearly. He's gone? He is. We have to go. There's nothing left for us here. Will we return? I don't know, Mane. Your ankle. Are you able to help me release the boat? Yeah, I can. Mane and Samdathan untied the boat and pushed it from the dock. They didn't check how much food they had. They simply had an intuition their cargo would be enough to sustain them. Samdathan ran towards the oar and began to row the ship. Mane, grab the other one. Help me row the boat away from the shore until we can catch the wind. The two of them rowed away from the island, and when they were far enough out, released the sails and began tacking the ship with the sea's breeze. Where are we headed to, Sam? West. We're going west. West? To where? I don't know. Mane looked down and began to cry. Samdathan looked at her. He ensured that the sail was taken care of and walked over to his wife. As he wrapped his arm around her, he assured her, We're free now, Mane. They're all gone. All of them. They both looked back on Heothan and saw that it was utterly enveloped in flames. Surely, no one that was there could be left alive. They're all gone, Sam. I know, my love. I know. Your father, my mother, our city, our families, our friends. Everyone we've known is gone. They're all still with us, Mane. They're all still here. Mane looked at her husband and buried her face in his chest. I love you, Sam. I love you. After several months at sea, Mane and Samtathan had become exhausted. They'd used up nearly all of their food, voyaged through storms, and found themselves still in the water. Yet on faith alone, had managed to sail westward for their entire trip. "We've nothing left, Sam." "I know, my love," muttered Samtathan, drained. "Wait. What? What do you see?" "There, Sam, there! Look at the horizon!" Samtathan gazed out on the horizon and saw a great green landmass before them. As their ship got closer to the beach, they had a clearer picture of the verdant body of land they were approaching. It was covered in pines just beyond the back shore. A grayish-red mountain range rose up from behind the trees, and a light mist covered all that the two saw. "We did it, my love," said Samtathan. "We did. We really did." Mane embraced her husband, holding her head to him. "We survived, Mane."